So welcome back, grade 10s. Today we're looking at ideologies. I mentioned yesterday that ideologies used to be a part of social 20 curriculum. So when your parents were taking social studies in the 80s or 90s, if they took social studies in the 80s or 90s, then they would have seen this topic in grade 11. Now we see it in grade 12. It is in fact the focus of grade 12. And we are trying to preload some of grade 12 here today in grade 10. There's the textbook for grade 12. You can see ideologies, basically the title of the textbook. So more understanding that you can get here today, the better you will be able to feel ready for 30. And let's be honest, 30 is a pretty big step for you, because as you move into post-secondary, they're going to be looking at your grade 11 and grade 12 marks. Grade 11 marks for early admission, and grade 12 marks for final admission. So a lot of our current grade 12s right now are showing their grade 11 marks to get early admission into university. So I'm not saying grade 10 doesn't matter, like this is your party year. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is the topic we're doing today in grade 10 will be important for you moving forward. So what is an ideology might be a logical question. I didn't even put the answer up here. But if ideologies is the title of the lesson, a logical question might be, what's an ideology? And an ideology is a set of beliefs and values. A set of beliefs and values. An ideology refers to the way we see the world. Where we expose my bad typing. That's pretty bad. Oh man, guess I should have done that. Remember earlier when I said let's do a spell check at the end when you're done? So ideology, a set of beliefs and values, the way we see the world. And definitely, when we talk about division of society, each source that we looked at this year so far has allowed us to see a division in society, because some people agree with the source and the problem that the source is exposing and the solution that we can infer from the source, the perspective being shown, and some disagree. So when we talk about them agreeing and disagreeing, what are they really agreeing and disagreeing? Because they have different ideologies. They have different beliefs about how the world should be. They have different values as to what those cornerstones of the world should be. There's different ways that they see the world. So in order to understand ideologies better today, we're going to look at some of the recurring themes within ideology. We're going to look at domination, we're going to look at competition, and we're going to see how these themes end up creating ideologies that have been used to exploit people. Thinking to next week, we know exploitation is a term that's a big rock on your essay. And therefore, a lot of what we're doing today will help you with your essay as well. So we definitely have some overlap there. We're also going to see some responses to the Industrial Revolution, some new ideologies being created in response to yesterday's lesson. So we're going to see more about socialism. So yesterday we looked at Robert Owen, we'll see him again, especially because the video didn't tape yesterday. And we'll look at Marxism as well. Also, we're going to have an opportunity to preview some multiple choice-like assessment as we look at this topic today. So there's a couple of embedded multiple choice questions in the lesson so that you can begin to prep for that last part of the midterm next week, skill-wise. So one way to look at ideology is to introduce a topic and see how people might respond to it. So one topic is, what is natural? Again, a building block of the essay next week is the term natural. So some would say that domination is natural. Domination is natural. Now who's the some, right? If you're writing an essay and say, some would say Some's general, straightforward. It's 60. So who would say domination is natural? Well, we're going to end up talking about social Darwinists. They would say it. Realists would say it. Those who believe in survival of the fittest would say it. Those who may believe in fascism would say it. Those who believe in natural selection would say it. So these are different groupings of people that would say, you know what, domination is natural. So when we say the strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must, a social Darwinist, a survival of the fittest, a fascist would say, yeah, well, that's natural. That we can see it in nature. We can see the strong dominating the weak. So domination is a natural urge, but others might say it's a poisonous desire within humanity. So although it's natural, it's also poisonous. And this could be an argument that you could wrestle with in your essay next week. The strong can do whatever they want, and the weak therefore would have to suffer what they must. And that is natural, but it's also poisonous, it's toxic, it's inhumane. Domination has also been used as a justification for centuries of Eurocentrism. The idea that Europeans have evolved differently, have evolved stronger, and therefore have a destiny to control others. That Europeans believe that because of the conditions, the environment, the geography of Europe, the way that they've intermixed, the years of bloodshed and war, competition over scarce resources, because of their history, Europeans are stronger stock, they're stronger people than Asians and Africans and Americans. So there's this idea that leads to Eurocentrism. Well, Europeans must be the best on the planet. And if we're the best, then we're justified to subjugate the least. So Eurocentrism justifies the carving of Africa, the shaming of China, the colonization of the Americas. It justifies centuries of Eurocentrism. Why can we own African Americans? Because they're not Europeans. Remember, we explored that idea in the slavery lesson. So, although it's natural, it's also poisonous because the idea that it's natural to dominate others has led Europeans to act in an inhumane way towards other human beings. So, domination has also been used as justification for centuries of Eurocentrism that imprisoned peoples that had been attempting to live isolated traditional lifestyles. So we may have some African tribes, some Asian tribes, some uncontacted people, even Japan. Japan today in 2020 is perhaps the most industrialized, most modern nation in the world. Compare Tokyo to Toronto. Compare Tokyo to New York City. Tokyo is a world city. But the Japanese in the 19th century, they didn't want to jump into the global village. They wanted to practice traditional isolationism. But the Americans, acting as a proxy of European interests, because America is just a child of Europe, they used their gunships, Commodore Perry did, to force the Japanese to trade with America and begin to adopt American values. So this idea of forcing these pockets of people wanting to live traditional lifestyles into the global village is a part of the domination. Perhaps the most delusional argument is that the unequal relationship benefits the weak. So remember when we looked at Indian imperialism, the British might say, but we're helping you. We gave you the railways, we gave you modern medicine, we gave you democracy and the language of English. That's a very controversial thing to say, because the Indian people, as we learned yesterday, they lost $57 trillion of wealth. They paid a high cost for those few gifts that the British left them. So perhaps the most delusional argument is that the unequal relationship benefits the weak, and some may even claim that they are parenting the less civil children of the world. What's that term that means you parent someone? soft paternalism. So why are we in Africa? Well, because the Africans, they're like children. You know, they're not as civil as we are. They need us to guide them. That's the argument of soft paternalism. That we're there to act as a parent because they haven't seen the light of Christ. They haven't adopted modern medicines. They might not have a functional alphabet as sophisticated as ours. This is extremely biased and disregards the wealth of different perspectives. So, preview multiple choice assignment. Which of the following actions would be most acceptable to a person who values the ideas outlined above? So, every multiple choice question becomes matching. So what you have to do is get an understanding of, what does this person want, and then match it with one of these actions. European carving of Africa to spread civilization. Colonization of areas of the world to increase trade. Creation of a network of nations under the influence of America. Decolonization of Africa and revitalization of traditional culture. There's a 3-1 split there. There's 3 answers that are basically saying the same thing. Each of them can't be right, so they all must be wrong. The one that's different is the one that's correct. One of these things just isn't like the other. In a multiple choice test, your job is to find the one that's different, the one that's right, the one that matches, in this case, the ideology that is shown here, the worldview that's shown here. Does the person that said this, do they want to see A, B, C, or D? That's all the question's asking. So think about it, because you have 58 of these next week. And the multiple choice is worth the same as the 2 right assignments combined. No! That's a lot. So, European carving of Africa to spread civilization. Does this person want us to go to Africa to spread civilization? Yes or no? And is there a sentence that tells us that? Well, this sentence here says, Eurocentrism lead to us imprisoning people that had attempted to live isolated traditional lives. So it's saying that they wanted to live traditional lives in isolation, and we imprison them to our ideology. So it's frowning upon imperialism, it's frowning upon colonialism. So it frowned upon A. And if it frowns upon A, it also frowns upon 2 other ones, are basically saying the same thing. So the answer is, who's going to shout it out? I heard someone say it. Sound of silence.
What if I just wrote it on paper?
Well, then I would be able to see it, but I don't know. I kind of wanted someone to I wanted everyone in unison to shout out, mostly because I see 3 people falling asleep already. I think if you shout out a letter, even if you shout out like X, at least you'd be awake, right? It's like, oh man, I'm partially awake now. I'm partially not a slumberer. So we already said it's not A. We said that there's 2 other ones that are basically saying the same thing as A. There's a 3-1 split. There's one answer that matches the ideology shown above, an ideology that says that domination's bad. So what's the answer? I hate my job. So there's another song, The Sound of Silence. We could play that song there. Yes? Is it D? How many people say it might be D? Hands up. There you go. Oh. Whew, that was tough. So we're going to have, for all, you did put a D or, definitely not an A, B, or C. So, so there you go. It only took you guys about 10 minutes. So we have 58 questions next week. So you'll need 580 minutes, so yeah, that's like 7+ hours. This is gonna be fun. Well, he's mean to those kids. He shouldn't be teaching. He's evil. The world has a finite of resources. Imperialism is the justifiable natural process where the powerful take from the powerless. This process has even been known to benefit both groups. This is a different ideology. It's an opposing ideology. I'm not here to tell you which ideology I prefer, but I'm showing you a multiplicity of opinion that is reality in a non-homogenized world. So what the assignment is now is to take this ideology and respond to this question. Which of the following arguments offers the best evidence or the best defense for this perspective? So, good news, this could be a part of your thesis next week. Now, if that's part of your thesis, then what's a supporting argument that you could use to support it? So it's not only helping you with multiple choice, this is helping you with your writing a little bit. So which of those 4 arguments would be the best defense for that above perspective? So first thing you got to do is figure out, do I understand the above perspective? So I read the question, and I figure out the above perspective. I figure out what I need to know to respond to the question. The world has a finite of resources. Imperialism is a justifiable natural process. So this person's pro-imperialism. So I'm going to give you a physical copy of the test next week, as well as a digital copy. And the physical copy, I might put a little happy face next to it, and imperialism, likes imperialism. So now I know this is pro-imperialism. Now I got to go down here and see something that is pro-imperialism, but there's a second part to it. The process has even been known to benefit both groups. So I need an example where it shows imperialism is helping both groups. The introduction of horses to the indigenous cultures of the Americas. So definitely benefits the indigenous people. You know, horses will change hunting and change transportation here in North America. So after I read A, I might be like, I don't know. I'm going to put a maybe. I'm not going to rule it out, but I'm not going to say it's the answer. I got to check with the others. The exchange of agricultural crops between the new and the old worlds. Mutual benefit. It's the exchange. Okay, now this one seems to better connect with the idea that both sides are helping. The first one, I've got to infer how it's helping the old world. You know, how is bringing horses to the new world and introducing them to indigenous people, how is that helping the old world? Yeah, I don't know. But B, the exchange of agricultural crops between the new and the old world, yay, we have potatoes in Ireland now, and you have some old world thing like wheat. I'm going to go with wheat. Anybody a farmer in here? This is a farming town. That's why we have Wetaskiwin. It's a farming community. Anybody want to say where wheat's from? We'll go with wheat, because we eat it all the time. We don't know where it's from. The you guys are doing a wait and see. Now you can talk. Of India, transforming that nation into the world's largest democracy. So here India is becoming a democracy. Here indigenous people are gaining horses, but A and C are lacking something that B has, and that's how is it helping the old world? Now you could make the argument that having an ally that's a democracy helps you, but this is more clearly showing that benefiting both than this is. The extermination of the violent and deadly Aztec tribe. Again, it's going to benefit the local tribes so that they don't have to be sacrificed anymore. But how's it helping the Spanish? Well, now the Spanish get to control Mexico. So the problem here is there's going to be nuances of correctedness. So that's why we have the word best defense. So you could use multiple answers in defense of that one. But which one provides the best defense? Yes? B it is. Look at you, you would be correct. That's 2 for 2. And that one only took you like seconds.
Well, I knew the other one, I just didn't want to be wrong, so I
Yeah,
was
who would want to be wrong?
You give us a limit on how many things we can answer in there.
True enough. So, another thing that we can wrestle with in terms of trying to figure out an ideology is the idea of competition. So, finite resources, the world has finite resources. There's only so much gold, so much silver, so much barley and rye and wheat and timber and cotton and ivory and spices, and let's quit naming resources, but there's a finite amount of them. It leads to competition. This fits right into that zero-sum theory, right? In order to be strong, I have to make sure I have more resources than you. If you gain resources, then I'm weaker because of it. Here's 2 perspectives on the role of competition in history. These are perspectives that you could apply to your writing next week. You can apply these to your essay. Perspective 1 about competition. Competition between members of a species is the driving force behind evolution and natural selection. That first sentence makes me think this person likes competition. Because of competition, we evolve, is what they're saying. And if you associate evolution with progress, then that first sentence makes me think that they like it. So as I read it, I'm trying to unpack it. What does it mean? Included in this is the competition for resources such as food, water, territory, and sunlight. Results in the ultimate survival and dominance of the variant of the species best suited for survival. So all of you farmers out there know that there's different varieties of canola. Which variety of canola should we plant? Which is the dominant species for our conditions? You want to have a bumper crop, so then you want to know which is the strongest variety so that you can have the best yield. So the same thing here is saying that because of competition, we have survival of the fittest, and we have the dominant varieties that are being able to reproduce. Because those that aren't able to get to the sunlight, those that are not able to get food and water will not have the opportunity to reproduce, and therefore their genes will be lost to history. So genetically, each one of you is a testimony to a struggle of the domination of the fittest genes to survive. So as a result, species less suited to compete for the resources must either adapt or die. So think about species that you know of that have adapted. The house cat. House cats live with us. We feed them, we change their litter box. We're basically their servants. But in nature, house cats, didn't live with us. They chose to be domesticated, and they did it for a reason. It was an adaptation. Because they adapted, their lives are pretty cushy now. Other animals have adapted. Often you see animals that have adapted to the incursion of man. They adapt and they find new sources of food, new sources of water. What do you think is one of the most adaptable animals in Canada that just seems to be able to thrive in the wilderness or in the middle of Toronto?
A deer.
A deer. There's a deer, right? You know what? Right on the Queensway, right? A deer can just be running, and it's okay, right? Deer live in Wetaskiwin, They adapt. They eat your grass. They eat your flowers. They find new places to sleep. I might suggest that there's even a few animals that are even more cunning, and therefore their numbers are higher. Now, maybe not in Wetaskiwin, but more higher in centers like Toronto. Very adaptable animal. An animal that knows how to forage. An animal that knows how to knock over your garbage can and get food. An animal that knows how to make a home underneath your stairs. Yes?
Just taking a guess, maybe a raccoon?
A raccoon. So much so that Toronto is called Raccoon City. Under your stairs. You don't have raccoons under your stairs? Like your outside stairs, not like the stairs that go to your basement.
No.
That'd be creepy.
I had a raccoon living under my stairs recently.
There you go. So raccoons. And the most adaptable animal are deer riding raccoons. Once you see that, you know that these animals have evolved. It's like, holy smokes. Now they have cavalry. Next up, they're going to invade us. Watch out Poland, because, the Polish army would get defeated. No, we're not going to make fun of Poland. So, adapt or die. This is why some 98% of documented species become extinct. Majority of the species that have ever been on this planet are now dead because they couldn't adapt. So what's more natural than needing to adapt? And how do you adapt? The strong feed on the weak. This is that first part of your essay. The strong feed on the weak. It's natural. That's how we survive. Survival of the fittest. It's an ideology. Social Darwinism. It's an ideology. In social animals, like you, even if you don't like other people, we're called social animals. The alpha is the individual in the community with the highest rank. So maybe one of your mums or dads is the block captain of your crescent or your road. Maybe your dad's mayor or your mom's mayor of a town or a county reeve or a chief. Maybe your mom or dad just has a lot of people that look to them for advice and guidance. That people look to them as a leader. So because we're social animals, we have within our social gathering we have alphas. So maybe in your own friendship group you're like, yeah, we always listen to Joey, even if Joey has a bad idea. We're like, oh, Joey thinks we should do that. We should do that. And then later you're like, oh man, why do I listen to Joey? So, and maybe you're the Joey. Maybe you're like, yeah, I'm the Joey. Most people think that they're the alpha. You all think you're Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And you might not be. So the alpha animals, are given, because you can have alpha females too. The alpha animals are given preference to be the first to eat and the first to mate. Among some species, they are the only animals in the pack allowed to mate. The term alpha male is sometimes applied to humans to refer to a man who is powerful enough through his courage and a competitive, goal-driven, take-charge attitude. Is Donald Trump an alpha male? I'll let you think about that. With their bold approach and confidence, alpha males are often described as charismatic, while alpha males are often overachievers and recognized for their leadership qualities. Their aggressive tactics and competitiveness can also lead to resentment by others. I want to introduce you to another topic here called the tall poppy syndrome. Tall poppy syndrome. It's something that Australians talk about. So, following my extensive life in Australia, and because I'm such a tall poppy myself, hey, you weren't supposed to laugh at that one. Tall poppy syndrome is this idea that we hate the tall poppies. We hate those who are naturally gifted. Those people that are 6'4", 225, chiseled jaw. Those people that regardless, they're always fit. They can eat garbage and they're always the fittest among you. I hate those people. The people that don't have to study. They're just like, oh, I just get it. Everybody likes them, and it's like, oh wow, why does everybody just hang on their every word? Hate those. So in Australia, there's something called the tall poppy syndrome, and it's this idea that we actually have a distaste for those among us that are the best. Maybe that's what America is going through with the Trumps right now. It's the tall poppy syndrome. As many people in America are very shamefully, celebrating the spread of COVID to the first family. So regarding the tall poppy syndrome, in English language arts, you might read a story called Harrison Bergeron. You read it in grade 12 if you do. In the story Harrison Bergeron, people who are born handsome have to be disabled to level the playing field. So, oh man, you're too good looking, so we're going to somehow disable you so that we can be at the same, everybody can be equal. We can be equalized. So if somebody's too fast, they might cripple their legs a little. So this is one possible vision of a future, is how do we ensure equality if some are genetically born different than others? Well, this is why my mom kept throwing me down the stairs, because I was too bright. So she'd just kick me down the stairs, and after a while, this is what happened. Thanks, Mom. Now I can relate to everyone else. No longer young Sheldon. So tall poppies, right? Tall poppy syndrome, Harrison Bergeron, this idea that there are some that are fitter than others. And in nature, they're the ones who survive. They're the ones who may, in a pack of wolves, get the exclusive right to mate. Because the wolf pack will only be strong if those with the strongest genes are procreating. So just as in nature, the alpha males in the alpha group, to remain strong, they need to feed on the weak, or risk becoming weak themselves. This is the beginning of your essay. It's the cornerstone of nature. Why shouldn't it be the cornerstone of society? Strong feeding on the weak. This is social Darwinism. The unequal relationship can also be seen to mirror that of a parent and child. Imperialism mirrors our natural parenting instincts and necessity. Just as individuals experience stages of development, so do groups, nations of individuals. Just as we cannot expect a child to be a functional, independent member of a global society, we cannot expect undeveloped nations, North Korea, maybe Afghanistan needs our help, right? What did Canada do for the last 20 years in Afghanistan? Nation building. We need to build your nation, because on your own, you're a failed nation. You're a rogue state. So we cannot expect undeveloped nations to function as independent members of a global community of nations. So it appears that it is natural for the strong to take from the weak, the strong to lead, and the strong to offer guidance. We're in Afghanistan to guide you. We're going to occupy Japan in 1945 after the war to guide you, to shape you in our image. Because Japan, you weren't on your own. You weren't being developed into the kind of person we want in society. So that's one idea about domination. But as much as this one was pro-social Darwinism and therefore imperialism, this one's going to be against it. Domination is a natural urge, but can be a poisonous desire. So we already read this one. But we didn't read the second part, the second paragraph. Instead of competition, the peoples of the world need to embrace cooperation. We all share one tiny blue dot, a unique and fragile, blessed home. But our planet is fragile, and life clings together in a small biosphere at the verge of extinction. If we are to have a lasting future and not join the vast majority of species that are forever lost, we must resist what is natural and rather embrace what is needed. What is natural has led to the extinction of 98% of the species. If we are going to be a species that lasts, we need to be beyond nature. So this could be a part of that last part of your essay. When you're like, oh, this is how it is, but this is how it needs to be. This is that last argument of your essay. This is your future casting. If we're going to have a future on this tiny blue dot, a unique and fragile blessed home, we're at the verge of extinction now. What are we going to do? So, that's a different perspective. One is promoting social Darwinism, one's promoting competition, one's promoting the opposite of competition, cooperation. Both are answering a question, what is the purpose of life? One is saying the purpose of life is for me to get strong, and the other one is the purpose of life is for we to get strong. Self-interest is promoted in the top one, and collective interest is promoted in the bottom one. So, social Darwinism, we're going to sum it up by looking at some quick videos. and then there's a Prezi. I think we'll do it in the order of my Prezi, the 2 videos, and then we'll be done this topic on social Darwinism. You'll hear it again in grade 11, you'll hear it again in grade 12, you're never going to spend an hour talking about it again. So this is the most you're ever going to get on social Darwinism. By the record, since we struggle on capitalization so much, I have seen social Darwinism big S, big D, but I've also seen it little s, big D. Regardless, it needs to have a big D because Darwin is like a proper noun because it's someone's last name. Social Darwinism is, as we talked about earlier, not today but a previous class, it's someone's perversion of the findings of Charles Darwin. It's not Charles Darwin saying this, but someone takes his scientific findings about the evolution of species and says, well, let's apply that to mankind. So I have a quick Prezi, because I used to think Prezis were cool, so I made like 300 of them one year. Kind of like how I'm making like 300 YouTube videos now. Who knows what the future will bring? Maybe I'll make 300 like magic tricks. I can't do that though. Social Darwinism. I just thought it was cool to start with the bald guy. I don't know. Bald guys are cool. Look at that guy. Look at his bow tie. All right, concept of adaptation allowed Spencer to claim that the powerful were better adapted to the social and economic climate of the time. So we need to be able to adapt. Adapt or die, right? I'm not going to go down all the rabbit holes, but social Darwinists looked at skulls and they looked at the adaptation among primates. And they talked about how some primates are more primitive than others because their inability to adapt. So how do we go from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens? Why don't we have Neanderthals on the planet now? Neanderthals were larger than we are. They were faster than we are. They were stronger than we are. Why are they not here? Because Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, adapted better. We were able to both hunt and gather, and we lived in more of a cooperative social setting than Neanderthals. Although there was limited intermixing of the 2 species of mankind, that's why we have redheads, there's not many Neanderthal genes left because they couldn't adapt. Natural selection justified that it was natural, normal, and proper for the strong to thrive at the expense of the weak. Again, you could be getting some language for your essay here. There's natural selection justified, natural, normal, proper. So there's building blocks for your essay there if you're someone that struggles a little bit with language. So it's not only natural, it's proper, right? Proper means it's the right thing to do. That's proper behavior. Proper is a moral statement. Like sit up proper, right? I'm not telling you to sit up proper. I was just using that as an example. Slouch all you want. I want you guys to be slouched over when you're in your 20s. Because then I will be able to be even more of an alpha among you. Because you'll be like, man, that guy's like 75. And, he's not slouched over. Wow. So, here's natural. I'm going to guess that lions can eat that ox. Muck ox? The muck ox? There's something in the beginning. Mucks. Yeah. I can't say it because my whole mass thing. So if you thought I just made like a slate against red-haired people and it wasn't like factual, there is genetically a link between red-haired people and Neanderthals. So my wife has red hair, so I like to bring this up from time to time. About how she's, genetically. But then I thought that was funny, and then I started like growing a beard once, and significant parts of it come in red. So I actually take that as a compliment, because now I'm a Neanderthal, and Neanderthals were bigger and stronger. So now when I go to the gym, and I want to bench like 325, because I got that, right? I'm like, let's release the Neanderthal. That's a t-shirt that should be made up, right? you're like, you know what, since you said Under Armour, I haven't picked up anything, right? Like, after Under Armour, I got nothing. Alright, fair enough. We're almost done. Because I'm going to pass out soon. Survival of the fittest is a parallel with nature and therefore is morally correct. That's an argument some say. Is where do morals come from? Do they come from God? What is nature? It's a reflection of God. So if something like survival of the fittest is natural, then who am I to say it's immoral? Is an argument that some make. Hopefully, with regards to this essay, you're just sitting in like an ocean of confusion to some extent, because it's been my point to present so many opposing viewpoints. And that's social study. There's no like x equals 5 here. So the unfortunate thing is, because of social Darwinism, you have ethnic cleansing and genocide. Social Darwinism leads to some of the most heinous crimes in history, because it justifies Lebensraum. The Germans need Lebensraum. We need our living space. It's our manifest destiny, the Americans say, to go and to settle the West and commit genocide against the indigenous tribes of the West. Hitler learned from the manifest destiny of the Americans in the 19th century and created Lebensraum of the 20th century. He's mimicking that idea of the strong feeding on the weak. So it dignifies and lionizes the weak versus the strong argument, summarized by the concept survival of the fittest, or strong do what they can, weak suffer what they must. Mankind's shared belief that the strong naturally hold power over the weak, and that the weakest will die off to leave the strong to survive and reproduce, is derived from observing nature and our own lives. That's social Darwinism. So, we've talked about it enough today, you're like, you know what, if our first goal is to know what social Darwinism is, check, we got it. And there's our friend, the blue-footed boobies of the Galapagos Islands. These are birds that couldn't exist in Alberta because coyotes would eat them. But there's no coyotes on the islands of the Galapagos. So they didn't have to adapt. But they would die here. They didn't have to adapt because they didn't have competition there. That's the whole point, competition. When you face competition because of finite resources, finite territory, finite water, finite sunlight, you have to adapt or die. They didn't have to adapt, and that's how Charles Darwin, by looking at them, he said, you know what? Evolution. He said, these birds couldn't exist in Europe because cats and dogs and other birds would eat them. But they get to walk around here like the kings of this little rock pile because no one can get at them. Evolution. So they take that evolutionary concepts from Charles Darwin and apply it to socioeconomic and ideological realities. And you're probably sitting there saying, I have no idea what this second part means, and that's okay. Sometimes I gotta throw some stuff in there just to kind of push you to the next level eventually. Laissez-faire capitalism, social engineering ideas such as eugenics, efforts involve the forced sterilization of mental patients and ethnic cleansing. So we talked about Lilani Muir here in Alberta, how her uterus was taken away, and it's justifiable by the Alberta government because they said, well, we don't want you to have offspring because your IQ is less than desirable. And again, looking into the case, we understand her IQ was less than desirable because of the condition she lived in, not because of any genetic and I can't say the word right now, precondition, I'll just say. But in hindsight, either way, it was still the wrong thing to do. So there's a whole flow of wealth, and you can see the wealth is flowing where? It's flowing to Europe and flowing to North America. So the flow of wealth from the south to the north is justified because the north is feeding on the south. Social Darwinism. $57 trillion out of India. Hundreds of trillions of dollars out of Africa. Remember the Congo? Leopold's personal territory, where he killed 10 million Congolese people so he could take their rubber. Social Darwinism, imperialism. Every morning I wake up on the wrong side of capitalism. Global capitalism is just survival of the fittest. We have winners, we have losers. What if some of the boobies, without the bluest feet, still get to breed? Because the whole point with the blue-footed boobies is the girls, the female blue-footed boobies, they go around, they look for the male with the bluest of feet, and then they're like, hey, let's have children. So if you're like a blue-footed booby, but you're really like an off blue-footed booby, like your feet aren't really that blue, you're a genetic dead end. No one's going to breed with you. That's another observation. So we have sterilization. There's the Leland-Muir stuff and eugenics. So this is all stuff you can go back into. The link is in the document. They used to measure people's skulls to see how human they were. And in Africa, they used this to justify the soft paternalism, but also the favoring of one tribe over the other. So in Rwanda, the Tutsis were favored over the Hutu by the German and Belgian colonists because the Tutsis seem more European. And when you go there and you look at a Tutsi and you look at Hutu, they look the same. A lot of the science was made up. It's pseudoscience. All right, so next up we have 2 short videos on social Darwinism, and then we're going to be done this. This is one of those videos where somebody's going to like draw some notes, and then we're going to have Chomsky, and he's going to say social Darwinism is horrible. So first one's going to tell you more about what it is. The second one's going to be a guy saying how bad it is. And then we're done this concept.
To the 1900s, social Darwinism was used significantly to encourage human competition, to oppose intervention in the natural human order, and was the idea that humans compete for the struggle of existence. Charles Darwin, an English naturalist and geologist, contributed much of his research to the theory of natural selection, also known as survival of the fittest. While many social Darwinists saw competition among different individuals and groups as an ordinary component of human evolution, it was also used politically to advocate laissez-faire capitalism, political conservatism, imperialism, racism, and to discourage reform and intervention. The main idea of social Darwinism is that the status and privileges enjoyed by the wealthy and powerful members of society are the results of their personal characteristics and traits evolving through natural selection. Those who did not possess these traits were found to be powerless and poor members of society, and it was widely believed that it would be best for the human race to let these individuals and groups struggle for survival and later fall out of existence. The belief that the small percentage of the wealthy at the top were the more evolved class of people was significantly advocated by Herbert Spencer, William Graham Sumner, and Andrew Carnegie. Herbert Spencer argued that social programs designed to aid poor people worked against nature. In support of Herbert Spencer's belief, William Graham Sumner, a liberal American social scientist, believed that the humans who were the most fit became the most successful. Whoever had the necessary skills to prosper would be the ones who would rise to the top. This included brains, talent, and hard work. In agreement with both Herbert Spencer and William Graham Sumner, Andrew Carnegie applied Darwin's survival of the fittest to society by arguing that a free market economy and non-interference by the government would allow for the fittest to evolve. The richest men in the country at the time, also known as the robber barons, were perfect examples of this idea. Men like Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and Vanderbilt came to power through their wise investments in the economy and later controlled a large part of it. Through hard work and perseverance, Andrew Carnegie embodies a true rags-to-riches story and is the true definition of social Darwinism. He came to the United States as a poor immigrant who used his connections and investments to work his way up the social ladder and into the robber barons as a successful owner of the Carnegie Steel Company. J.P. Morgan, an American financier and banker, was another man who greatly believed in the idea of social Darwinism. John D. Rockefeller, the richest man in American history, as well as a founder of the Standard Oil Company, believed that the growth of a large business is merely a survival of the fittest. Cornelius Vanderbilt created a ferry service at a young age, which would make him into one of the richest men in America. Furthermore, social Darwinists believe that the weaker members of a species in nature would die, and that over time only the stronger genes would survive and be passed on. Social Darwinists believe the same evolution should happen with humans. This led them to oppose government handouts, safety regulations, and laws restricting child labor. Such actions would help the weak to survive, which would be unfit to natural selection. In short, Herbert Spencer, William Graham Sumner, and Andrew Carnegie, along with most if not all Darwinists, believed that they were rich and empowered because they were superior human beings in the evolution process.
So wow, we're rich and powerful because we're superior, and we can't help you because you're weaker. If we help you, you'll just breed more, and it'll bring society down. That's why we can't have welfare. Now, having said that, men like Andrew Carnegie, they were very charitable. You know, Carnegie Hall is just one of many lasting pieces of the legacy of his philanthropy, of his charity work, redistributing his money to his community. So they didn't touch on that part of his character. So last thing we're going to look at is Noam Chomsky, and he's going to talk about how social Darwinism is horrible. The last video we tried to build it up and say it's natural, that's how you create strong societies, you allow the strong to breed. It's kind of like Gattaca. You know, if you ever see the movie Gattaca, you know, only the smartest people get the best jobs and get to have special privileges. Chomsky is going to argue against that.
Well, there is the social Darwinist view that Herbert Spencer is famous for developing, that in a capitalist system, it'll be nature and red and blood and claw, the strongest win. And Goldman Sachs has given us an illustration, or maybe IBM, and so on. But they're not illustrations. They are illustrations of how the nanny state, the powerful state that's run by the principal architects of policy, designs policy in such a way as to enrich and privilege the designers. What's it got to do with capitalism? I mean, there's a kind of a capitalist fringe to it. But what about Herbert Spencer? Well, at the same time, or a little after Herbert Spencer, there was a response, much less known, namely Kropotkin, natural historian, who wrote a book called Mutual Aid, a Factor in Evolution. And he argued the exact opposite. He argued that on Darwinian grounds, you would expect cooperation and mutual aid and to develop, and leading towards community workers' control and so on. Well, you know, he didn't prove his point. It's at least as well argued as Herbert Spencer is. And in fact, Kropotkin essentially founded what is now called sociobiology or evolutionary psychology, but his contribution is sort of unmentionable because he came out with the wrong conclusions. Nobody could give right conclusions. Human nature probably has all of these factors in it, but some of them are favorable to the interests of the rich and powerful, so those do survive. Here there is, if you like, a Spencerian element. The ideological concoctions that are beneficial to the rich and powerful, they'll tend to propagate. The ones that are harmful to the interests of the rich and powerful will tend to be marginalized and suppressed. But that has nothing to do with the reality of the world. That has to do with how power systems function.
All right, there's the lesson on social Darwinism.